Very proud of the leadership and the ownership that we saw last week amongst the staff and the players. By far the most complete game that we played, and I think it's a direct reflection of applied leadership, right? I think amongst the staff and players, people did a really good job. In their position in particular, all the people that they directly affect, I thought it was the reason that we played well. So great week of work last week from an energy and urgency standpoint. I do think we started fast in the game, which was a focal point. We controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, controlled the edges. We were the most physical team, and we felt like that combined with turnover margin would be critical. Few plays in special teams that we need to detail up and coach better. But outside of that, we 6 quarters in a row here, we've shut the opponent out. We're playing better on defense situationally. The coverage and the rush is working together better. And offensively, outside of the last possession of the game, I think that's the 4th game in a row we haven't turned the ball over. So few issues in the red area on offense that we need to improve at, but good day for the Gators, right? And I think it's good to see a group work hard because they really care about a group of seniors and they want that group to have a great memory for senior day. I thought last week from a military appreciation, saluting those who serve, first responders, all of that was very positive, and we're thankful for all the people that contributed to that. So we're right in the middle here of the Vanderbilt prep. This is a group that continues to get better. There's no question. Year 1 to year 2, Clark's done a great job. You can see the improvement within this season. They've got some young players that continue to get better. Got their first SEC win in a while, and there's some momentum that we'll have to deal with that goes with that. So tough place to play. A lot of challenges when it comes to going on the road here to win a game. So what questions we got?
Really one of the challenges obviously be the weather. Could be in the 20s when you guys are playing. Just will be maybe some challenges with that and just another 11 a.m. kick.
Yeah, we don't control the weather, right? So, we'll do our best, in regards to that. Can't have an opinion on it because we don't control it, right? So we'll show up and play, and whatever the conditions are, they are.
Did you learn anything from that A&M trip, just maybe starting out a little slower than you wanted to with an 11 a.m. local kick, and maybe anything else you'll do differently on the road?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think we quality controlled that trip. We are going to do a handful of things differently. From a time allocation standpoint, what we do, I think it's important in the beginning of the week. I think the sleep habits of the players and staff throughout the week will be important. And I think as you approach Thursday night, Friday night, kind of making sure that we make adjustments there. But, parts of our team started fast. The other parts didn't, right? So I think consistency as a whole, trying to keep some of this momentum. The things that we learned work Saturday, hopefully we can apply those.
Really somebody who finishes fast or strongly has been Montrell. What is it about like a running back who's able to just get stronger as the game goes? I mean, I forgot, but you were on the same staff with Derrick Henry. I mean, he's a little different physical stature, but still, what is it about a guy who can do that?
Yeah, I think that's a heck of a question. I think that is definitely true. I think, and those players would tell you that they get more comfortable with more carries. I think Montrell is a 215, 20-pound back, and he's 5'11" and a half. He's not a burner. He's 21 and a half miles an hour. I think he hit in full gear the other day, which is good. But he's got really good instincts and vision. I think he anticipates contact. He's got really good contact balance. I think Montrell Johnson's effective because he's a great person, right? Like this guy's a very disciplined guy. He's got character. He's very smart. He's one of the best practice players that we have. And he's in year 2 of his career, right? I think last year he kind of got a feel for it. This is year 2, but it's a different level of competition. So I think he's getting more comfortable, and I'm glad we got him.
Is there a common thread, though? I mean, you were saying it's a good question, but if you had to guess, I mean, you've been around the game a long time.
I think a bigger guy probably fits into that mold if I was betting. And then you got to play on a team where they'll hand you it enough times, right? So, but, you know, Derrick Henry, you know, that's the freakiest football player I've ever been around, hands down, right? I mean, that guy's in a very unique work ethic, right? I mean, I've watched that guy come off the field on Tuesday practice and get in the squat rack and just go for another hour. You know, I mean, and he still works that way, right? He's still doing it, right? I mean, so I think he's one in a million. Very unique player.
Billy, you've used the word momentum about 3 or 4 times already. Are you seeing momentum in practice as well as we see it on the field? Are you seeing that kind of momentum in practice as well?
Yeah, I think every part of our routine, I think we're improving at, you know, self-discipline to follow through with all the parts of, you know, running, lifting, recovery, training room, meetings, walkthroughs, practice habits. And it's not just players, right? You got to remember that all these people are refining what they do, right? So there's no question that momentum part it applies to every single part of what we do.
Billy, from a standpoint of getting a team ready for an opponent that you're favored over, how happy were you to see that result of the Vandy Kentucky game?
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, those are outside, those are external things. You know, we'd like to think that we're motivated by other things. There's a human nature element to this, though. There's no question that Vanderbilt will be different as a result of winning the game, right? I think that's a reality. So we'll have to combat, you know, some of the positive things that come with them winning the game. So I think it's healthy. But I do think we have work to do, right? We have things that we're specifically focused on here relative to our team.
Billy, in your opening statement, you talked about how South Carolina is the most complete game you've played because of applied leadership, was the phrase you used. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that, and how do you see that?
Yeah, I see an intentional approach from players to be vocal about things that need to be addressed, right? Things that need to be said. You know, I just see more vocal, and I'm talking across the board. I'm talking about doing extra. I'm talking about accountability. I'm talking about being intentional about connecting with your teammates. Just across the board, I think just a little bit different level of accountability and being intentional about doing acts of leadership, right? I think you got to, and I think our staff is helping in that regard.
How do you coach ownership like that, taking ownership?
Well, I think you give them opportunities, you know. I think, I think really believe in that part, right? And, you know, you assign responsibility, you empower. I think there's a fine line in there between, you know, forcing something and then creating an opportunity, praising. You know, I think the big thing is you praise what you see being done well, right? I think we want to promote the behaviors that we're looking for, right? And I think that incrementally over time, that becomes the expectation, right? So I think we got more good going on in those areas.
Can a coach influence which players the other players listen to, or is that something that the players kind of have to figure out for themselves?
That right there is a book in itself. You know, I do think that's always a juggling act, right? I do think that one of the key components of a team that involves so many people is learning who has influence, who has a voice. And then I do think that, you know, that person's example is probably the most impactful part, right? If that person has influence, if that person has a voice, if they have the ability to affect other people, their words and actions matching up, right? Their consistency in their approach, right? Their character not being compromised maybe by saying something that's out of line or doing something that goes against maybe what you're trying to create. I think that's probably the most important thing. And I think that's where our issues have been in the past, and that's what we're trying to correct and get back on the right path.
Seems like there's a lot more kind of gang tackling effort, guys to the ball. How much of that is an effort thing, or how much of that is maybe guys getting comfortable with the system too?
I think there's a little bit of both, but I do think you're spot on. I think the pursuit is better, the energy is better, and I really believe this. Like, it's year one in a new system, but information, knowledge, when applied, right, can make a difference. So if I'm processing quicker, if I'm communicating better, if I'm anticipating, I get more production, right? And there's a compound effect. If each individual is doing that, I think there is a result that comes with that, right? So I think we've got a group. Also, we haven't been very good, right? So I think there's a little bit of a pride element there. And I think we've got good leadership on that side of the ball within each room, with coaching and players, being more vocal about the things that they know can be done better.
And how do you carry that over dealing with Wright, who's a pretty dangerous runner?
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the things that's tough about Vanderbilt is the uniqueness of him as a player, right? So that'll be part of the strategy within the game.
You mentioned keeping it technical. Is there something, and this is not just an Anthony Richardson question, is there something in season you can do to help a quarterback's accuracy, or is that a high rep, high volume, off season type of thing?
I think that, being accurate is physical and mental, if that makes sense. I think there's so much that happens in a very small amount of time, relative to declaring where I'm going with the ball, and from the ground up, everything being synchronized, starting between the ears and then fundamentally from the feet all the way to the ball coming out of your hand. I think so. I think it's mental and physical. And that's why it's the most challenging thing to do in all sports, right? But I think it's a good question.
Do you have a completion percentage threshold you'd like him to hit? Do you have like a number? It always varies by throw, but
QBR is really where 145 plus is the number that we kind of hang our hat on. A lot of things affect that, right? Completion percentage being one of those, but ultimately, heavy factor in that is touchdown to interception ratio as well, right? So explosive plays influence that number. So I think overall,
We know about
how many
Ventrell.
times has he hit it?
it's a good question. I don't know that right off the top of my head.
Sorry to
We
interrupt.
know about Ventrell as a leader. Would you talk about some of these other leaders that you had talked about before, who are guys that have the ears of the younger guys? Because
Yeah.
75% of your team is sophomores and below?
Right. I think that Rashad Torrance is a leader. I think he's a very smart football player. He's got great command of the system. His ability to communicate, I think because of his knowledge and his instincts in production, he has influence. He's a guy that does a great job in the back end. He's a fantastic practice player, probably the best communicator that we have, and does a great job of kind of helping everybody around him play better. Amari Burney's an influential person, very experienced player. Guy's got a good heart. He's got character. If you don't like Burney, something's wrong with you. So he's a good human being, and I think works really hard. And a guy that he's kind of the old grandpa, if that makes sense. He's the old uncle. He's been around. He's seen a lot. I think he sees the big picture. Javon Dexter, I think, is a young man who's growing in that role. He's getting comfortable with his voice. I do think my man AP Powell has some influence. I think he's a guy that is capable in that area. I'm just thinking about defense in particular because I think that's the area where we've grown the most. Offensively, there are parts of our team. Anthony Richardson, I think, is really emerging as a guy that is developing that skill set as a leader. He's getting more comfortable in his role, speaking with clarity, speaking with conviction, being intentional about what he's saying, why he's saying it, taking time to think about our team, right, and what they need to hear and what he can bring to the table. So I think that growth has been impactful for our team.
Time for a few more, Mark.
A little 30,000-foot view here, but you mentioned Vanderbilt showing progress under Clark Lee. Obviously, there's varying degrees of turnarounds going on in the SEC. South Carolina, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Mississippi State a little bit. Is there a couple things that are absolutely one and two necessary to getting that thing started?
Yeah, I think the big thing is at the player level. At some point, you've got to have a nucleus of players that say we're going to do this, right?
The coaching.
Right. There's a conviction about. There's a connection between the staff, the organization, and the philosophy, the resources, the commitment, the process, whatever's being taught, whatever's being implemented. But I think I go back to number one on the list, okay, is that there's a sincere approach, right? There's a care for the player more than just football, right? There's a plan for who they are as people from a long game, there is a investment in their character. There is a prioritizing their education. I think that equipping them, educating them, creating experiences for them. And then ultimately, if you have that sincere approach and they really believe that you care about them and that there is a plan for those areas, then you got to know what you're talking about, right? There's got to be a competency relative to, this guy cares and he can help me play better, right? Because ultimately you can't have one and not have the other. I think at some point, hey, I like you, but you can't help me, so, or, you can help me, but man, you don't care about me, so I think that trust is a big part of that, but those are two things in particular I think matter.
You mentioned the red zone offense. What do you feel like have been some of the recent issues, and what do they need to do to improve?
Yeah, Saturday in particular, we had the last couple of weeks. It's been penalties. We had procedure penalties. Had a handful of mental errors. Nothing to do with the opponent, which is the frustrating part, right? So those are all things that we can coach better. I think those are all things that I think we can help the players with.
And when you get in a goal line situation, after seeing what we saw Saturday from Desmond Watson, will we give any consideration?
Yeah. Always have a running deal with the defensive players, right? If we're top 10 in the country in scoring defense and total defense, we'll put defensive players on the goal line package. So hopefully that day's coming.
All right. Thank you, Coach.
You coach at Clemson, but you're probably too young to remember the fridge. Do you remember?
Oh, heck yeah, I remember the fridge, yeah. Believe it or not, we, I won't say that, but yes, well aware of the fridge.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.